Milk is the only movie I can think of that I've seen twice in 1 month in my life. This is a great occasion, and it is at a special time in the history of this country. Many of us read Frank Rich's column in the New York Times on Sunday, in which he celebrated changes in the laws in Iowa and Vermont and looked forward to a change in law in New York State and felt triumphant. And then on Monday morning, many of us picked up the Boston Globe to see the heart-wrenching and tragic story of a wonderful young boy who hanged himself in Springfield, Massachusetts, apparently as a result of homophobic harassment. And it reminded us that there is much that still has to be done. And it's a special obligation in this school, because our mission, immodestly stated, is to train enlightened public leaders. And so we feel that enlightenment really has a long way to go. But my job right now is to celebrate this event, and, as is often my task, to say thanks to a number of people. I was raised by the School Sisters of Notre Dame, and they always taught us to be sure to say thanks. Let me start with some McCarthys. I would like to thank Tim McCarthy, who just gave a splendid lecture in Star Auditorium, the Nicholas Papadopoulos lecture, a fabulous and very moving lecture, and who has been part of planning this day for months. And Mary Alice McCarthy, who is a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School and who has also worked in planning this event, and who was the moderator for a very interesting panel earlier this afternoon. Having grown up as Joe McCarthy in the 50s and 60s in Washington, D.C., I have not always had an opportunity to be proud of my name, but I'm proud of being a McCarthy today. I'd like to thank Thor Steingraber, to my left, a mid-career student, who has been central to planning today's day, and then a number of people. So if you'll let me go through the list: Assistant Dean Judy Kugel. I'd like to thank Kurt Shepard. I'd like to thank the Carr Center for Human Rights Policy that has sponsored today's event, the Harvard College Dean's Office, the Harvard College Women's Center, the Harvard Gay and Lesbian Caucus, the Kennedy School Degree Programs, the Institute of Politics. The Institute of Politics, by the way, runs this wonderful forum that we are sitting in today. The Institute of Politics, the Office of Career Advancement at the Kennedy School, the Open Gate Foundation, of course, the Papadopoulos Fund, and the Kennedy School Gay and Lesbian Caucus. We at the Kennedy School are very proud to host today's events. But I know that they would not have come off as successfully as they have so far, and this particular forum would not be taking place without the efforts of the woman I'm about to introduce. She will moderate this evening's panel and forum event. She is our Director of Alumni Relations here at the Kennedy School, and also a student in the Kennedy School. A man I worked for years ago named Richard Marius, who ran the expository writing program at Harvard College, once described someone as, it stayed with me, he said of this particular person, their personality, their intellect and personality glittered like gold. I always think of those words when I'm with Paige. Paige Ennis, please.
Thank you, Joe. There's one person who was left off that list, and that is our very own Dean Joe McCarthy, without whom this day was not possible. So here's what we're going to do now. We're going to spend about 30 minutes with our panel, and then I'm going to come back up and open the floor to questions from all of you. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our two student panelists, starting with Liz Terry. She's a first-year MPP student from Western Massachusetts. Liz spent the last 6 years in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for the last 3 years, Liz worked at the National Center for Lesbian Rights, the organization that was the lead counsel in the California same-sex marriage. After graduating from the Kennedy School next year, Liz hopes to continue her leadership in advancing LGBT policy, and we encourage her to do that work. And she also wanted me to tell you that she is a 4-time national champion rugby player. Thor Steingraber, who is a mid-career MPA student from Los Angeles, California, is a mid-career student from Los Angeles, California, where he worked for the Los Angeles Opera for the last 14 years. He is the recipient of the Hauser Center Fellowship for Arts, Culture, and the Media, and I think I can speak for all of my fellow mid-career classmates when I say he is our beloved colleague. Yeah. Thor is a teacher of young singers, having been in residence at universities such as Yale, but we don't talk about that, Indiana, and California State. His work as an opera director has taken him to cities around the world, but particularly he has lived in Chicago, New York, and San Francisco, where he moved in 1990 at the height of the AIDS epidemic. Thor's activism has always been his art, and that's an understatement. Since coming to the Kennedy School, he has been practicing a different kind of activism, which led all of us to this event this evening. So with that, I turn it over to Thor, who is going to introduce our guest of honor.
In the forum and at the Kennedy School, we gather around some very complex and difficult issues sometimes. And we view those issues through a variety of different lenses. And tonight's lens is the one of an artist, the one who tells the story. Sometimes a story well told is more important and more powerful than all the policy a policy school can impart. So it's with great honor that I introduce our guest tonight, who was, for 3 seasons, the writer and executive producer of the Emmy and Golden Globe nominated television series Big Love. And then in an instant, he entered 50 million living rooms and became a new spokesperson for the movement.
Well, here are the nominees for Best Original Screenplay.
Frozen River by Courtney Hunt.
Happy Go Lucky by Mike Leigh.
In Bruges by Martin McDonagh.
Milk by Dustin Lance Black.
Wall-E, screenplay by Andrew Stanton, Jim Reardon. Original story by Andrew Stanton, Pete Docter.
And the Oscar goes to Dustin Lance Black for Milk.
Oh my God, this was not an easy film to make. And first off, I have to thank Cleve Jones and Ann Cronenberg and all the real-life people who shared their stories with me. And Gus Van Sant, Sean Penn, Emile Hirsch, Josh Brolin, James Franco, and our entire cast, my producers, Dan Jinks and Bruce Cohen, everyone at Groundswell and Focus, for taking on the challenge of telling this life-saving story. When I was 13 years old, my beautiful mother and my father moved me from a conservative Mormon home in San Antonio, Texas, to California, and I heard the story of Harvey Milk. And it gave me hope. It gave me the hope to live my life. It gave me the hope to one day I could live my life openly as who I am, and that maybe even I could fall in love and one day get married. I want to thank my mom, who has always loved me for who I am, even when there was pressure not to. But most of all, if Harvey had not been taken from us 30 years ago, I think he'd want me to say to all of the gay and lesbian kids out there tonight who have been told that they are less than by their churches or by the government, or by their families, that you are beautiful, wonderful creatures of value. And that no matter what anyone tells you, God does love you, and that very soon, I promise you, you will have equal rights federally across this great nation of ours. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you, God, for giving us Harvey Milk. Is this working? I've never had to follow myself before. It's really tough. You know, I just prepared a few things. These are just some of my thoughts, because I often say, like, you know, politics and the gay movement brought me to milk, not the other way around. So, I don't know. I mean, I guess at this point, for those of you who haven't met me yet, my name is Dustin Lance Black, but everyone calls me Lance, so please feel free to do the same. I'm going to read a little, because I'm not, you know, a political science student. I'm not so good at this. When it's over a minute and a half long. But basically, you know, like I said, I grew up in this Mormon military household in San Antonio, Texas, right? So you learn early on what gay means, very early on with Mormon and military. And some of the early words that I learned were faggot, cocksucker, deviant, sinner, turd burglar. That's a military one. They were always the most colorful. And I'd heard those words ever since I was a little kid. And they do something to young gay and lesbian kids. They tell them that they are less than. They tell them that they are second-class citizens in this country. And you know that if anyone finds out your secret, that not only will it bring probably physical harm to you, but it's also going to bring great shame to yourself and likely great shame to your family. So you have two choices in most of America. You can either hide and keep it a secret, and in my case, hiding meant starting a little Mormon family of 20 or 30 kids. That really wasn't in the cards. Or you could do what I thought about constantly and what so many kids think about constantly, which is taking your own life. And thankfully, in my case, there are not enough pills in a Mormon woman's medicine cabinet to do the job, so I never succeeded. But I did end up retreating into myself and crying myself to sleep on more Sabbath nights than I care to remember. And then somewhere around the summer of 1988, 10 years after Harvey Milk had died, I heard a speech. And the speech, I want to read you a little bit of this speech. It goes like this. It says, somewhere in Des Moines or San Antonio, there is a young gay person who all of a sudden realizes that she or he is gay, knows that if the parent finds out, they'll be tossed out of the house, the classmates will taunt the child, and the Anita Bryants and John Briggs are doing their bit on TV, and that child has several options. Staying in the closet, suicide, and then one day that child opens up the paper and it says homosexual elected in San Francisco, and there are two new options. One option is to go to California or to stay in San Antonio and fight. And you've got to elect gay people so that that young child and the thousands upon thousands like that child know that there's hope for a better world, that there's hope for a better tomorrow. And I was 14 years old when I first heard that. And you know, it was the first time in my life that I knew that someone loved me for me. 10 years after his assassination, Harvey Milk's message gave me hope, all the way out in San Antonio. So, but then the question is, why write Milk? Why spend 5 years of my life, you know, working on a story about Milk? And it's because I bring his name up in groups of friends. And these are politically active friends, gay friends. And they would nod like they knew they should know who he was, but they absolutely didn't know who he was. And as the saying goes, if we don't know our history, we are doomed to repeat it. And that's exactly what the gay and lesbian movement has been doing over the past 10 years. Harvey's message was simple. It was to come out, to represent yourself, and to reach out to other minority groups. If you look at, say, Proposition 8 in California, there were very few gay people in the ads, in the advertisements, in the lawn signs, in the literature, and there wasn't enough effort made to reach out to other groups or to educate. So it came as no surprise to me as I'm studying our history that we lost that fight. You see, what I discovered with Milk on my research trips wasn't like the legend of the man that I'd grown to know as a teenager. It was about a deeply flawed man. I grew to know a man who had grown up closeted, a man who had failed in business, failed in his relationships, who got a very late start But once he did get started, he wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers. He wasn't afraid to agitate. And by agitating, he convinced an entire people to come out of the closet, to reach out to other groups, and against all odds, especially in 1978, in a time people would call far more homophobic, against all odds, he won on Election Day. And that's the lesson. His work did not start and stop with the gay and lesbian movement. He understood the interconnectedness of all minority groups in this fight for equality. He understood that the LGBT movement is just one piece of a much larger, completely interrelated civil rights struggle. And he's in good company here. I want to read you a quote. This is from Coretta Scott King, who said, "We have a lot more work to do in our common struggle against bigotry and discrimination. I say common struggle because I believe very strongly that all forms of bigotry and discrimination are equally wrong and should be opposed by right-thinking Americans everywhere. Freedom from discrimination based on sexual orientation is surely a fundamental human right in any great democracy, as much as freedom from racial, religious, gender, or ethnic discrimination." She could see, like race, our sexuality is not a preference. It is not a choice. I did not wake up at 6 years old and say, hey, I want to, join one of the most loathed groups in all of America. I didn't choose that. Like race, sexual disposition is immutable, unchangeable, and our great Constitution protects us all against prejudices and discrimination based on immutable differences. And Harvey Milk didn't just understand this interconnectedness, he felt it, and he worked very, very hard for his brothers and sisters in this fight, the seniors communities, the disabled, the women's movement, the racial minority movements, religious communities, all of the us's out there, because he understood that gay and lesbian rights will never be secure until all of our civil rights are secure, until we are all equal. And that was perhaps Harvey's most important message, was that of the us's, that together we are unbeatable at the ballot box. And I firmly believe that it is time for the gay and lesbian movement to reach out again and to work just as hard for her brothers and sisters in other communities as we have for ourselves. It is time for the us's to come back together and start winning these fights for each other again, and that, to me, is step one. So step two, and we probably all saw this, step two, in last fall in the DNC, I tuned in, probably like most of you, to watch the Democratic National Convention, and just for some historic context, let me read you something from back in 1972. This was said by Jim Foster. He was an openly gay man, and he was given a slot in front of the Democratic National Convention on national television. He said this: "We do not come to you pleading your understanding or begging your tolerance. We come to you affirming our pride, affirming the validity to seek and maintain meaningful emotional relationships, and affirming our right to participate in the life of this country on an equal basis with every citizen." That was in 1972. It's pretty brave. 36 years later, what did I hear? Not a lot. President Obama, he stumbled over a single sentence about our gay brothers and sisters and hospital visitation rights. So I thought, okay, what's changed? Are the Democrats afraid of what happened in 2004 when so many say that the marriage issue cost the Democrats the White House? It sounded like it to me. And then there was the RNC. There was Sarah Palin and John McCain and all these flashy democratic or patriotic speeches. And did you hear what they had to say about gay people? No, because they didn't say anything. And that's actually one of the scariest things. That I feel I have a deeper fear here, and that's that perhaps the RNC has figured out the sure way to kill the gay and lesbian movement, and that's to make us disappear. And it's happened before with Reagan and the AIDS crisis with 6 years of silence, because at the time there was this belief that it only killed gay men. And that brings me to Harvey's second belief regarding the LGBT movement. You see, one of our biggest challenges has always been invisibility. Unlike the black movement and the women's movement, gays and lesbians are not always immediately identifiable. People still go their entire careers without coming out to their bosses or their coworkers, or even their grocery clerks when they go to the grocery store. This entire concept of coming out and the more aggressive concept of outing was practiced by people like Harvey Milk and some of these people in the 70s to counter this visibility problem, because they knew that if people don't know personally who they are discriminating against, they don't mind so much voting against their civil rights on Election Day. They need to know us. They need to know our personal stories. Because 30 years after Harvey Milk gave his life for this movement, I am still less than a heterosexual in this country when it comes to my civil rights. If I fall in love with someone from a different country, I cannot bring him here. I can't be out in the military. There are inheritance rights issues, pension rights, hospital visitation rights, employment and housing discrimination issues, and on and on and on. And the message to young gay and lesbian youth coming out today is that they are still inferior. They are still less than. And that's why when I look at Proposition 8s, I look at the Proposition 8s in California and I go, you know, it's devastating. It's a devastating loss politically. It's a devastating loss for our civil rights. But why is it not just devastating politically and socially? Why is it so much more dangerous than that? Because I feel certain that there's another kid out there in San Antonio tonight who woke up on November 5th, 2008, and heard that gay people had lost their rights in California, that they are still less than, they are still second-class citizens, and I know all too well the dire solutions that may have flashed through his or her head. Let me read you some statistics I found out when I was researching Milk. It's this: 1 out of every 3 gay or lesbian youth seriously contemplate suicide. Gay youth are 4 times more likely to try and take their own lives than straight youth. And if a kid does survive, if they do survive and they come out to their families, 26%, over a quarter, are told to leave home. Those statistics are not from 1978. Those statistics are from 2008. The religious right has claimed time and again that gay people threaten their families, threaten their children. That's how Anita Bryant started this whole fight 30-plus years ago, her Save the Children campaign, her war against homosexuals in Florida 33 years ago. But the truth is, these kinds of hateful, homophobic messages are literally costing our world's children their lives, literally. So that takes me to my big point, and it's this. It's a thing I've found universally true in my life, in my career, and I'm not alone here. I want to quote Julian Bond. He's a founder. I'm sure you guys all know who he is. He's a founder in the Black Civil Rights Movement. He's a great hero of mine. And he said this. He said this the other night. He said, "Good things do not come to those who wait. They come to those who agitate." And a Harvey Milk quote leapt to mind. And it's from Harvey's first run for public office in 1973. When people kept telling him, hey, you need to settle down, it's too soon, it's too early to run for public office, we have straight allies who can do that. And he said this. He said, "Masturbation can be fun, but it doesn't take the place of the real thing. It is about time that the gay community stopped playing with itself and get down to the real thing." There are people who are satisfied with crumbs because that is all they think they can get, when in reality, if they demand the real thing, they will find that indeed they can get it. So what is the real thing today for the LGBT movement? What do I want for the gay and lesbian kids out there to hear tonight, to hear that we are fighting for? I want them to hear that we're fighting for the dream of full equality. And for me, that dream of full equality sounds a lot like this. We, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered people of America, demand that the promise of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence be honored. We demand that the federal government act immediately, decisively, and unequivocally to ensure equal protection under the law for LGBT people throughout the United States of America. Full and equal equality, full and equal federal rights. That is the dream. You see, no group has ever been able to win full civil rights in this country going state by state and county by county. Even if Proposition 8 had failed, those marriages would not have had federal benefits. They would still be second-class marriages. I feel in my heart it is time for the gay and lesbian movement to dream bigger than Proposition 8 and look back to the example set by the Civil Rights Act of 1964. It showed us loud and clear that full and equal civil rights can only come from the federal government. Because I believe that now is the time to send a new message to the LGBT children in this country and in this world that we are fighting for full equality now, not partial equality and not in some distant future. I know the road to full equality will be rough and the challenges are great, but naming this dream tonight is so very important because it may sound like politics and policy to us. But to the kids out there tonight, that message sounds a lot more like this. You are not less than. You have brothers and sisters, gay and straight, black and white, thousands of us. And your struggle is our struggle. And your fight is our fight. And most importantly, you are loved, and there is hope for a better tomorrow. Thank you.
Wow. I've almost recovered. In that moment at the Oscars, you became a sort of household name, and you became a gay hero and icon. And that's something that took Harvey many years to do. And I wonder how you feel about that responsibility, if it is a responsibility, and what that means to you.
Oh, boy. Well, that's a huge compliment. I'm looking out here at some of my heroes. I see Sky right here. I mean, there's a lot of people here who I know have been working in this movement for a very long time. So, I sort of stand on their shoulders and listen to their guidance. And, it's my generation's time. We have to step up to the plate, and we have to, take moments like that when we get opportunities like that and do the brave thing and really fight for our lives. These are our lives we're fighting for. So, I hope that I'm just following in the footsteps of people like Sky Johnson here, who did work with Harvey Milk on the No on 6 campaign, and continue that fight. Make him proud, I hope.
Turning to talk about the film a little bit, as a writer, what was your motivation or your inspiration while you were writing it?
While I was doing Milk? I was motivated. I mean, I sort of touched on it a little bit, but I was motivated because people hadn't heard of him. And I think I started writing it in 2004 is when I started researching. And it was funny because then there was a presidential campaign going on. And it seemed to me, watching it, that the kind of Roe strategy was to pit the evangelical community against the gay and lesbian community, and sort of get the vote out that way. And some of the language I was hearing was, save the children, save our families. It was that sort of stuff. And I'm sitting there reading the literature from Anita Bryant in 1978, and it's identical. And I start to think, Harvey was able to win. He was able to win election and beat down, a statewide proposition 30 years ago. What lessons are there to be learned from that? How can we recreate some of those successes now? And so that was a big motivating factor. And then he is just kind of a father figure to me.
We'd be remiss not to have a little bit of Harvey in the room. So I've queued up a clip from the documentary called The Times of Harvey Milk, which I think you used in some of your research. I'd love us to play that now.
All over this state, my message to you is, so far, a lot of people joined us and rejected Proposition 6, and now we owe them something. We owe them to continue the education campaign that took place. We must destroy the myths once and for all, shatter them. We must continue to speak out, and most importantly, every gay person must come out.
So tell us a little bit about how that documentary figured into making the film Milk, and generally the ways that you researched this film.
That's an interesting clip. I'll get back to why that clip is interesting in a second. But the documentary was, I finally got to see it when I went to UCLA Film School. I'd wanted to see it for a really long time, but it doesn't really hang out in Mormon, video collections. So I finally got there, and it's one of the movies that they had saved, and I think now it's restored for all time, and I watched it, and I think it was the first time that I'd heard a recording, but I'd never seen him. And seen how charismatic he was, and then I got it. I thought, of course, he's a natural leader. He's winning. He has the type of personality that he could walk into a union hall and get union guys that have always hated fags to, shake hands and be like, I like that fruit. And that's what you hear a lot of in that documentary. And it's, he was really, just by being himself, able to change minds and dispel myths and stereotypes and things like that. So it was helpful in that way. Then the documentary became a research tool like 10 years later, or however many years later it was. And Rob Epstein, the filmmaker, was really fantastic in helping find the archival footage. Because I had decided early on that I wanted Anita to play herself. Because I thought if I wrote what she had said and wrote how she was, it would come up as caricature, and I was afraid of that. I didn't want to do that. So he was helpful in helping me find more real footage of Anita. And then, I tried to stay as true to Harvey as possible. I tried to stay as true to his speeches and to his language and how he talked and behaved as possible. And it's funny, you played like the one clip where I had to rewrite that speech, and the speech you see in the movie is completely different. And it's not because his speech wasn't wonderful. It was wonderful. It was just his stump speech, and it sounds awfully like all the other speeches he gave. And so it got repetitive, so I gave him something new.
That sounds like a big choice you had to make while making the film. What were some other difficult choices that you had to make, and what sort of responsibilities did you feel in getting those choices right?
Yeah, well, a little background, because I didn't have a book. There was another movie that Warner Brothers had been trying to make called The Mayor of Castro Street, based on Randy Schultz's novel. It's a fantastic novel. Please, if you like the movie, go see it. And you can learn so much more about the intricacies, the political intricacies of the gay movement in the 70s. But I didn't have the rights to that. Warner Brothers did. So I had to go out and meet all the real-life people and get first-hand stories, which was great. It was a great thing to have to do, but it also meant I knew them, and they were my friends. So when it came time to truncate certain stories, telescope certain stories, combine characters. There's a lot of things that you see, say, Cleve Jones do that he didn't do all of that. Someone else did pieces of that, or same with Anne Cronenberg and Dick Pavich and all of that. It was tough because a lot of them are still around, and they were sort of like, hey, why'd you give Cleve my bit? And so, but it was helpful storytelling-wise. And so you have to do that. I think that, because you don't want it to be 3 or 4 or 5 hours long. You want it to be under 2 hours so people will go see it. And so there's fictionalizing that happens in the editing. And, but you try to be true to the spirit of it. I think that's the thing. You try to be true to the ideas, to the spirit, and to the character of what happened.
So I'd like to skip ahead from 1978 to 2009 and ask you this question. Why is it that we're still fighting the Anita Bryants of today? Did making this film give you any insights into why we're, in fact, covering some of the same material we covered 31 years ago?
I mean, I have my opinions. And it's stuff that I learned over this 5-year period, because I didn't even know we were repeating some of the same mistakes. I think most people don't know we're sort of repeating some of the same mistakes. What seems to me to be the most distinct difference between Harvey Milk and some of the gay and lesbian leadership that I know today, that I call friends today, is this notion of coming out, this notion of outreach and education. I feel like if we had a really effective outreach and education campaign, if we were able to more effectively tell our stories, convey our stories, let people know who was affected, that we could start to change minds. We could start to change the hearts and minds of this country, and it wouldn't be so hard on Election Day. And Harvey, I think, proved that. I think he proved that in San Francisco when he finally got elected, and he proved it definitely in that battle against Proposition 6, that if they know us, they're far less likely to vote against us.
All movements tend to have their martyrs, and I think Harvey could potentially be one of ours. How is this woven into the film, especially the scenes at the kitchen table with the tape recorder?
Wait, say that again.
Can you talk a little bit about how I think the martyrdom of Harvey was woven into the film?
Oh, okay. Yeah, Harvey, it's funny, because that was like, when I was building the script, I went, you wanted to give a real sense of this guy knew he was getting into something very, very dangerous, right? And I think in an early draft I put in there the actual quote, and he really did say, this is only to be played in the event of my death by assassination. Like, he had a real sense that that would happen. And I had that in there alone, and I thought, oh, as people are reading it, they're like, God, this guy's egotistical. Boy, he thinks he's like Martin Luther King or something. So that's, in the script, why I also put in there the fact, early on, that it really did happen. So that you have the same sense that he did, and I really do think it's the sense that he had, that the more he pushed, and the more out he made himself, and the more he made himself that figure, he knew that he would likely be killed for that. It's really horrifying. If you, like, Anne Cronenberg pulled out the box. She sells this giant box filled with the death threats. And you see a couple of them in the film, but there's boxes filled with death threats. And some of them are very specific, and they're often very, very brutal. So he must have known that someone would eventually do, what they were threatening to do. I don't think he ever expected it would be Dan White. But yeah, he knew he was putting himself in a position to be a martyr, willingly putting himself in that position.
I moved to San Francisco in 1990, 12 years after Harvey was assassinated, and I used to walk down Market Street and then up Van Ness to the opera every day, so I walked the same route that candlelight vigil took the evening that Harvey was assassinated. It was very much a part of our collective story, and the image in the documentary is an important one, and I'd just love to play that clip for a moment. This is the candlelight vigil in San Francisco the night that Harvey was killed.
thousands and thousands of people. And that feeling of such loss, having lost someone who was so important and something, you know, Harvey stood for something more than just him.
Combination of Harvey being killed and a combination of going down with all those people.
Living in San Francisco, Harvey Milk definitely changed my life 12 years after he was killed, and I wondered how making this film maybe changed your life in some of the obvious ways, but maybe in some not so obvious ways too.
That one still gets me.
Yeah.
How does it change my, it changed my life, I think, because you know, like once you know, you can't turn back. You know, that's a lot of it. So, and I didn't know, and I don't think most of the people in my generation do know that there was a Harvey Milk, that someone gave their life for our civil rights, that someone said some of these things that were so proud, you know, that we have this father figure out there, and, you know, that empowered me. But it's also sort of a call to action that you just can't ignore. And so I had to write it. I had to try and get it back out there. And now I want to, you know, keep doing good and keep trying to further that, that message and get that message out there.
I think that's our last question, and we're looking forward to hearing questions as well from the floor. So turn it over to Paige.
Hang on, you. I just want to say this. Dean McCarthy and I are sitting there trying to figure out how to get you to run for office. Because you were pretty amazing, actually. Okay, so the tradition here is that we ask that you identify yourself, that you give us a short, concise question that actually ends in a question mark. And we've got 2 microphones down here and 2 up on the balcony, so we're going to go clockwise, and we'd like to start with another beloved colleague.
Mary Alice McCarthy, and I'm a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School. And first of all, thank you for this amazing film, and also for your statements at the Academy Awards. It was very heartening to see. My question is, you know, thinking about representing gays and lesbians and bisexuals and transgendered through art is always a complicated thing, and I think about Ellen DeGeneres, which was actually a big part of my coming out, was watching this show and realizing, wow, you know, I can really identify with this person. And there's always that trade-off of how do you represent gay people authentically without alienating your audience? And that, you know, that became this big thing of, you know, Ellen couldn't be too lesbian. And I imagine in Milk you must have confronted that idea of how do you represent authentically Harvey Milk and gay life in San Francisco in the 1970s, and then deal with that, take care of your straight audience. I was wondering if you could address that.
Right. Oh yeah, it's a great question. I was really lucky, first off, because I wasn't a studio film. It was just a spec script, so there was no studio saying, hey, let's make it less gay, let's make it more about the politics than, you know, the lifestyle, or whatever it is they would call it. And I know that had sort of plagued the other project they've been trying to get made since '89. I know that was part of their trouble. So for me, I just didn't pull any punches in the first drafts, and strategically, I tried to put a kiss and a love scene right at the beginning. And that we did test the movie in a really, really conservative area. And I remember the testing guy came in, he was so proud, he's like, I don't think we have a single Democrat in there, and everyone hates Sean Penn. And we're like, I was like, oh, great. And that first kiss, the whole audience, I mean, we were just afraid they were going to walk out, like they were audibly, you know, disturbed. But, you know, by the second one, which is like a minute long, there was not a peep. And, you know, they were all crying by the end. And we ended up testing like an 80 out of 100, meaning 80% of the audience would suggest that a friend see it. So I felt like just get it out of the way, and by number 2, they'll be less awkward. By number 3, it'll feel normal and natural. I think we could take some cues from that and how we fight our political battles here and our outreach and education campaign stuff. Yeah, so that was the, and then I was very, very fortunate because then Gus Van Sant signed on. He doesn't exactly shy away from gay subject matter. Focus Features came in, who had done Brokeback Mountain, so they didn't want to take anything out. And in fact, I think it was more Sean Penn saying, hey, more, let's do more in this scene. He wanted more gay sex. And in the end, it's Gus, and if you know Gus's movies, he never really shows graphic sex at all. So Gus was like, no, it makes me uncomfortable. That's how I did it.
Hi, is this on? Hi, I'm Lul Goshu. I'm a graduating student here at the Kennedy School, and I'm part of the leadership of the Harvard Kennedy School LGBT caucus. My question is, pretty much, will America ever see, what steps can we take to make sure, in film, to make sure that America sees gay change agents, you know, LGBT change agents that are as diverse as we really are?
Yeah, we got to get, you know, I don't know, I had this conversation, I was at the GLAAD Awards thing, and I ran into all the L-word girls, and I said, you know, we were talking about milk, and I said, yeah, but what about Valencia Street? You know, there was this really rich lesbian movement going on right above, you know, the Castro near Dolores Park, and, you know, it's tough. There's no money in it. You know, you don't really make a bunch of money making a gay political film, and so I think it's really just getting, you know, gay and lesbian writers and transgender and bisexual writers and producers in Hollywood to step up.
To mainstream America, because there's you know, there's a niche that goes on with gay and lesbian films, and we're starting to see the diversity in that. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying, like, to have a movie as powerful as that, where, you know, where it is truly change agents know no color, they know no, you know, gender or sexuality. I'm wondering, in that respect, in mainstream film, what could we do in order to promote that?
In order to get it out in a more mainstream way, I think that studios are more open to it than certain studios, smaller studios. The Focus Features, the Fox Searchlights are more open to these storylines and these characters than a lot of writers and producers think they are. But you know, it just is going to take socially active activists, writers, and producers to put it out there. You know, anyone could have done Milk. He's been, you know, the story's been out there for 30 years. It just takes somebody to say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and you got to push it through. And you know, the actors love doing it. It's not like there's any difficulty in getting any actor in Hollywood to sign up to be in a socially active film, to a transgender film or a lesbian film or any of these sort of films. So you can get it packaged. It's just, it's getting them to do it and to, like, not worry about their pocketbook for a little while.
Thank you.
My name is Aaron Malloy, and a couple years ago, in the 2006 election, I was the youngest person in U.S. history to win a highly competitive Republican primary. It was one of the most conservative districts in the country. And I didn't really see, you know, my being openly gay as a problem or anything like that. You know, I care very deeply about gay rights. Harvey Milk was a huge inspiration to me. So, do you think that it's sort of possible to, you know, sort of assimilate, you know, evangelicals or Mormons into the gay rights movement without it being like an us versus them? You know, is there any way to sort of reach out to evangelicals, you know, rather than being, I guess, divisive or, you know, to vilify, you know, Republicans or evangelicals? Is there any way to sort of, you know, sort of bring them into the movement as a whole?
I think we have to. I mean, it's like necessary. You know, I come from a very religious family, and just by coming out and telling my story and them getting to know me, it's really changed minds there, and it's sort of like, and then helping them through. It's like, I feel like in the past 20 to 30 years, politicians have used the gay thing and the evangelical thing as this, you know, this wedge issue, this way to fire up their base, right? And I hold them very, very responsible for creating this divide, because I think it's an unnatural divide. And you know, it's in this, I have this bigger speech I give, and it really does call on our leaders to take responsibility for that and to start a reconciliation movement between religion and the gay and lesbian movement. I know, like, what can you really do? It's like one of the things that I try to do is, A, talk about it a lot, you know, B, open about who you are and know your scripture, because, you know, there's a lot of scripture that they might not know, other, you know, rules that they don't follow, things that are historically sort of outdated. But also reach out. It's sort of the gay and lesbian, I think it's our job to reach out to those communities. So like, say, we all got to take our film, Milk, to our hometown, right? And I was like, San Antonio, whatever, I want to take it to Salt Lake City. And so we took it to Salt Lake City. And when we took it to Salt Lake City, I took it there and made sure the invitation was out to the Relief Society, which is the women's group of the Mormon Church. And they showed up, which was fantastic. You know, and there was a few of those same sounds that we got when we tested in the conservative area at first. But by the end, it was a standing ovation, and they came up and said, can you cut like a PG version that I can bring back to my Relief Society? Right? So, you know, it's about, I do think it's our job to reach out and to help educate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Colin. I'm doing a PhD in philosophy. I guess I'm wondering why you think gays are hated so much. Like, I feel like it's a failure of imagination on my part, but I just can't figure out why people care so much who we have sex with. Like, I can't occupy that super conservative perspective. So I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think we're fabulous, right? We're fantastic. Yeah, right? What's the problem? I don't know. But I think that's the thing. It's like, and I say this too a lot, and I believe it. It's like, I think every single American, almost every, there's a few that won't, but almost every single American loves gay and lesbian people. They might just not have really met us yet. And that's the thing. Once they meet us, once they get to know us, they're like, wow, you're fabulous. You're fantastic. Or like, you give a good haircut. I don't know. But you know what I mean? It's like, so yeah, it's the same thing. It's that same answer for me. It's about reaching out. It's about letting them know the real people, because then the myths and stereotypes melt away.
Hi, I'm Catherine Kluver. I'm a Master's of Public Administration student here, and that was actually what you just mentioned. I think the point in the movie and in general that struck me most, because I was about 6 years old the first time I met one of what I now consider as my us, because my mother helped many of her friends in the 60s come out. And so this story is very close to my heart. I then went on to go to arguably probably one of the proudest LGBTAQ institutions in this country, Brown University, where in the first day or first week of being on campus, I, as a straight woman, had to write a coming out letter to my fellow peer group as part of my LGBTAQ induction. And that was hard. And you know, I was like, I don't know how to say this. And then I realized, wait a minute, so many people don't know how to say this. And we observe the Day of Silence at Brown, and it's something that has become very, very dear to my heart. So my question in this institution of higher learning is, how do we educate and how do we have this moment of recognition and this getting to know us happen far earlier than a college experience? We all had to go through this. White, black, gay, straight, what have you. Every color under the sun, we all wrote a coming out letter to one another. But this happened when I was 19 years old. And it was only because of my mother that this was not normal to me, but that I had to go through this thought process very consciously. So what can we do earlier? You've talked about education, you've talked about youth.
Outreach. I think probably a lot of people here probably have some fantastic ideas, because there's not any one. There are like hopefully hundreds. I know for me it's about the media. That's what I'm in. So it's about in the media telling gay and lesbian stories, in the writer's room for a TV show, pitching gay and lesbian characters and storylines, even when they don't want to hear them anymore. You know, it's about just having a presence. And, you know I'm not going to be satisfied until we have at least a percentage of storylines and characters in the media that represents our true presence in real life, right? And I don't think we're anywhere close to that yet. And hopefully that will start to make America feel like we're part of the fabric of this nation. And once they feel that, once the country feels that, then I think we're going to make leaps and bounds of progress. I think it's very hard for people to deny us our rights when they know that we are Americans just like them, that we're their brothers and sisters, all that stuff. I mean, I do it in the media. I think there's probably some other really, really effective ways to do it. GLSEN, the gay-straight alliances, you know, however early we can start that. I know someone did a children's book about Harvey Milk, which was fantastic. But there's not any one way, and I just challenge everyone to figure out their way of getting the word out. Yeah, great, let's do it in elementary school.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Liz Swaney. I'm a master's student in the design school here in real estate. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and in 2004 I interned for Mayor Newsom's office, so I was witnessing all these wonderful like gay marriages that were happening. So throughout my life I've seen the importance of just accepting diversity and accepting just others. And my question is actually a religious question. I noticed that in your speech and today, your words were very, very moving, and you spoke about growing up in a religious household, a Mormon household that was conservative. But then you also thanked God for bringing us Harvey Milk and said it was okay for the kids out there because God loves you. And I was just wondering if religion has evolved from something possibly negative to something possibly positive in your life, and could you just elaborate more on the role of religion just growing up and if it's affected your work?
I just think that a lot of you know, GLBT people are robbed of religion, and not just whatever their religion is, but their spirituality. They're denied it, and I think that that's wrong. I think it's another place where we are unequal, is that we are not made to feel like we have equal access to our spirituality. And I do think, for me personally, my spirituality is important to me. You know, it doesn't matter to me if anyone else is or not, but I think that so much of this country, kids, one of the first ways that they're judged is to be told that God does not love them. And so I wanted to let them know that in my heart, I think that that's wrong. I think that they are loved by whatever God they believe in. That's just my personal
belief. Hi, my name is Lindsay Maisel, and I'm a senior at the college. And one of my favorite things about the movie was just how tender and real all the relationships were in the film. And as someone who's worked in film and in television, I was wondering what you think of the portrayal of gay characters on TV today, and what you think are the most positive or negative portrayals.
I'm going to admit something really. I don't really watch television much. I know, that's bad. You know, I'm a big advocate as give us as much as possible. I want to see how diverse we are. I want to also see that we're a little bit fucked up sometimes. We have the same problems as, you know, straight couples, because I think that's important too. So, you know, nothing really leaps to mind except that who loved Ellen? I really love Ellen as well.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Neuer. I'm a senior at Harvard College. And I think the film does a great job of not shying away from certain aspects of gay culture, such as the cruising in the opening scene or a drag queen at the celebration party. But on the other hand, it also kind of paints Harvey's relationships as being mostly monogamous, which, from what I've read, maybe wasn't always the case. And so how, when writing this screenplay, did you strike a balance from, you know, paying enough respect toward the gay culture that was existing at the time, but also making it so that Harvey came across as a hero and could be related to by mainstream audiences?
Good question. I mean, the two relationships that I did portray him in the film, the two that I picked, he was monogamous in, as far as I know. I mean, who knows what went on. But, but you know, he was an intensely romantic guy. I've talked about this before. Like, some of the stuff you learn when you're reading about him is that he did have these long monogamous relationships, and he wrote these effusive love letters. And it's like, I'm sure he'd be embarrassed if he knew we were all reading them today. But it was kind of easy for me, the stuff that he was doing that might be more questionable, which it all happened much earlier when he was, before this movie begins, a lot of it. But that was sort of tied to the kind of sexual revolution stuff. He was in New York City, so he was doing that thing, and I didn't touch on that. He did tell some of his later boyfriends that he wanted to have, like, open relationships and stuff like that, but that fell right in that time between Jack Lira's suicide and the end of the film. So, you know, I didn't touch on it too much, but also I didn't want to shy away from cruising, because he was cruising. I mean, they do go home and screw after they said like 5 words to each other, which I'm sure some of the religious right doesn't like that. But, you know, I don't know, I tried to be as honest as possible, and it was just sort of made it easier that I wasn't portraying that time.
Hi, my name's Marco. I'm a sophomore at college, and I'm also a co-chair of the Harvard College Queer Students and Allies. So we've been talking, I feel like, a lot about some of the external opposition that the queer community's faced, and no doubt through some of your work and research, you've found that in that time, too, there's always been complacency, there's always been apathy, there's always been fragmentation, and a lot of our internal obstacles that we have to deal with within our community, and especially going to what is considered a liberal institution in what is considered a liberal area of the country. I think some of these issues may be amplified. So I guess my question to you is, drawing up on the work and the research and the things that you know and that you've learned, what are some of the most important things we can do to really galvanize people within the queer community, or especially the younger generation? How can we galvanize people to identify with and to do something with a queer movement? And do you feel like that we need this kind of tragedy or urgency or kind of pressure to really push ourselves forward, or can we do that independently within solidarity? Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get it, because I get
Sorry, from Canada.
I get it. I get it. Because we thought we were all cool in California until Prop 8 happened, and we all started getting upset and angry. And it's sort of like we, you know, wish we'd all been a bit more upset and angry earlier than that. One of the things that I look at, you know, it's all based on some of this history that I've been reading. It just seems like you have to have that leader. Harvey was just, you know, he was able to get out there with a bullhorn. He sort of made political theater out of it. He sent his little guys into the bars and really would put whistles in their ears and say out of the bars and into the streets. You know, he just wasn't, he wasn't casual about it. He was really confrontational about it, and confrontational with his own community, and putting it in their face that they weren't doing what they needed to be doing. So, you know, I think that kind of leadership, that kind of charismatic leadership is something we need today. And I think it's starting to rise a little bit. One of the great things about like Prop 8 is all of a sudden you're seeing some of these young people who aren't scared to jump on top of a police car with a big rainbow flag. I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but you know what I mean? They understand the political theater, and they're creating political theater again, and that's so important for any movement. It's one of the things that I feel has been missing a bit since perhaps the end of the AIDS crisis.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Page, and I am the undergraduate minister at Memorial Church, the university chaplaincy here. The question I've got is, you talk a lot about, or you talked about coming out as being important, and that's one of the things that really came through through studying Harvey Milk. I'm just wondering what is the situation with Hollywood, and why are there not more gay out actors? I mean, it seems like there are a lot of gay actors in Hollywood, and none of them ever come out. Even the ones that are fairly well established, or the ones that people sort of know are gay, they still sort of keep the lid on it. I mean, living there and being with these people, I'm just wondering if you can speak to that a bit, and will that change? I mean, because that seems like it would be a good way to move things.
Mm-hmm. Which ones are you talking about?
You can tell me, I don't know.
No, you're right. It's you know, because as directors, writers, producers, it's so easy now, and it's almost like you're kind of celebrated in a way. And you know, it's and there's a family of out gay people and that side of things. But yeah, actors, I don't know. There is an intense amount of pressure from the agencies and the management companies not to come out if they find out you're gay. But there's also that's a filtration process, and when they're looking for young new talent, they're like, may as well go the easier route with a straight actor and bring that one on and send that one out to auditions. So it's like something needs to be fixed there. Because I know when we were casting Milk, we said, and it was important to Gus and I, we went to the casting director and said, we want to meet out gay actors for all the gay parts. And it was almost impossible. We got a lot of great people from the theater world in New York, and we cast them, like the Stephen Spinellas and Dennis O'Hare's, when they came to us. But for the most part, in Hollywood, for like the Cleve Jones role, the young role, almost nobody. I mean, we had actors come in and audition eventually who said they were straight, and we kind of knew better, or it's just apparent. But you know what? We did the opposite. We did not cast them. So when we knew someone was closeted, a closeted actor came in to audition, we said, no, forget it, that would be a slap in the face. So maybe we're starting to combat it from that way. But it's, yeah, it is a problem in Hollywood, and we are sort of waiting for that kind of, you know, that Jackie Robinson moment almost, where we have that A-list actor who can greenlight a film, who comes out of the closet, and people still, accept him or her as, a leading role, leading man or leading woman who can be believed in a heterosexual love scene. And when that happens, I think it'll change quickly, but it hasn't yet.
Yes, sir. Hi, I'm Brian Schroeder. I'm a third year at the law school, and I know that after falling in love with Milk, a number of us are eager to see the next work that you have. Could you talk about maybe next steps that you see, and has the immense success of Milk changed anything in your mind?
Changed it
in
what?
terms of your plans?
Oh, no, not really changed. I had a couple projects lined up, so I'm doing one for Gus Van Sant, same director, the electric Kool-Aid acid test. A movement of a very different sort, the psychedelic movement. And so that's pretty much done. And then I'm doing a movie that's not announced yet, so I can't tell you everything, but it's still in politics. It's in national politics, more in Washington, D.C., and it's the exact opposite. It's the cautionary tale of a closet case and how that can destroy civil rights. And I'll let you sort of try and figure out who that might be about.
Coming soon. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Chris Doss. I'm an alumnus of the Education School and a current teacher at Boston Latin School. And I teach at a liberal institution in a liberal state in a liberal city. And the GSA at Boston Latin is surprisingly still a fringe group. There's maybe only 10 or 12 regular members there. Many of them claim to be straight, and many of them are still women. So I was thinking, as a teacher, what can I do to help the gay youth of my school kind of feel comfortable and try to take that group away from the fringe and into the mainstream. And I was wondering if you had any advice, or maybe looking back at your high school career, what you wish your teachers could have done for you to help you make you feel more comfortable in who you were back then.
Oh, I went to North Salinas High School. It was pretty rough. You know, I mean, one of the things I'm doing, I don't know, I'm going there on May 8th and starting a gay-straight alliance there. I don't know, I mean, I hope it doesn't become a fringe group. That would be really unfortunate. I think it does take teachers, and God knows there's probably gay and lesbian teachers in all of these schools. It does take those teachers to sort of stand up and be leaders in their school and to tell their stories and to, hold themselves in a way that they're still respected. The kids will look up to them and they can be a role model. That'd be really fantastic. I wish I had that. I didn't have that. Yeah, I don't know. I guess as aggressive as you can get in getting those straight kids to participate in the gay-straight alliance, I think that might make it easier for the gay kids to feel comfortable.
Hi, I'm Sean McGuffey. I'm a professor at another university, which I won't say. But my question is, how can we think about how to use all of the gay community and all the voices that are inside the gay, lesbian, transgender community, and those voices are heard? Just thinking about the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force a couple years ago came out with this big survey that suggested that the interests of black gays and lesbians just are not being met in the mainstream gay and lesbian community, nor are low-income gay and lesbians or rural gay and lesbians. Like, their interests just aren't being met by the mainstream gay and lesbian community. So I was wondering, how can we bring all the voices to the table of the gay and lesbian community, that they can all be heard, all be respected, and all be on a gay and lesbian agenda? And can the media do that? Because I think about we have queer as folk, we used to call it queer as white folk, and we had Noah's Ark and the DL Chronicles, which aren't even on the air anymore. And so how can the media be part of this coalition to bring like the entire gay, lesbian, transgender community together? All the voices are heard, and can the media be a part of that, getting that out there?
Yeah. Yes. I think we can. I'm trying. I put pressure on some of these other writers I know to go out and tell their stories. It's sort of speaking to this thing about, the show business, and people want to make money in it, and they sort of ignore how socially helpful it could be. And there are fantastic, inspiring stories from all different segments of the gay and lesbian population. And I agree. It seems, as I've sort of got over the past few years, I've gotten to know the gay and lesbian movement in this intimate way, and the leaders in the movement. It does seem fractured, and it does seem like we need something. We need a dream that is more unifying. And I sort of saw this like in California with the whole marriage thing. The young people didn't give a shit about it, really. They didn't do, I mean, some did, but for the most part, they sort of were like, okay, well, I hope it doesn't pass. I hope Prop 8 doesn't pass. And they're not as interested in sort of the relationship recognition stuff. But the second that it did pass and they felt discriminated against, then they showed up on the streets, thousands of them. So it's like, how do we unify this movement? I think you name all of the things we need. It's not just relationship recognition. It is discrimination. It is, so we don't just need INDA. We don't just need, DOMA to go away. We don't just need Don't Ask, Don't Tell. We need comprehensive reform. We need a comprehensive dream, and we need to name that comprehensive dream so those kids are equally as interested in fighting for that dream as perhaps the 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds who are much more interested in relationship recognition. So, I'm always saying more comprehensive legislation will inspire our movement more than these sort of bits and pieces and the crumbs that we kind of ask for along the way.
Hi. Hi, I'm Kayani. I'm 07 Kennedy School graduate. You mentioned a number of times the important role that the mass media plays in getting the American public to understand the LGBT population. But I also see the tendency that in mass media, a lot of times the LGBT population tend to be portrayed as really highly educated, really successful, middle class, very talented. But as we all know, actually in LGBT population, they could be like a cashier working in a supermarket. They could be high school dropouts. And also the stereotype, the generalization that mass media creates of LGBT people being successful also hurts LGBT people. For instance, Scalia already said, LGBT people are not being discriminated. Just look at all the successful people out there. So my question is, as someone from the mass media, what can the mass media do to actually help portray a more accurate reflection of the LGBT population, and also actually let the American public better understand the different fragments of LGBT population?
We have to portray all of that diversity. It's tough, and it's like a challenge. I said it at that GLAAD dinner, or not dinner, the awards thing. I said, we have to be brave enough to continue to pitch gay and lesbian storylines in the writers' rooms. Because there's these writers' rooms in television, right? And it's like, they try to mix it up with all kinds of people, and there's usually a gay person or two in there. Sometimes there's not. And you pitch those ideas, and because it doesn't speak to that person's personal experience, they might brush by it. So in that way, it starts to sift out in a way, and only the more stereotypical sort of depictions sift through, because that's the only thing maybe these other writers have heard. So it's about that diligence and that bravery of those individual writers in those writers' rooms, pitching those storylines, and when they say, no, pitching it again, no, pitch it again until it gets through, and that they are specific and they speak to that individual writer's experiences, whether it be, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, or whatever, socioeconomic sort of background. So, it's tough, but we gotta keep pushing.
Hello, my name is Janet Schur, and I'm a graduate of the college 40 years ago, and grateful to the Kennedy School for letting us keep learning. I have a question about the movie. Having seen it and loved it, I felt that there was a little bit of ambiguity in Dan White's motivation. Leaving the movie, I felt, well, did he kill him because he was gay? Did he kill him because Dan White was unbalanced? Did he kill him because they were political rivals and Dan White felt undermined and unappreciated? And was that a conscious choice? I assume that was factual, that there was some ambiguity about his motive, but was that a conscious choice to, and maybe I was the only one who felt his motive was ambiguous, but Okay, so can you talk about can you talk about that decision and the feeling that one can leave the movie thinking, wow, what was the motivation?
Right. Well, no, I think it was complex. The more I found out about Dan, the more I found it wasn't a simple answer. I mean, the gay thing was certainly a piece of it, and you know that was threatening to Dan White. Not just because he was homophobic, which, you know, he said some things which were intensely homophobic, but because he represented you know, a whole way of living and a whole way of life and a whole neighborhood that was sort of stuck in a much more conservative time. And so in that way, the gay issues were something that he would, you know, needed to fight against for his people. But, you know, he was also severely disturbed. You know, so that was a big piece of it. And he didn't understand politics. He didn't understand the give and take. He was a very black and white thinker. He didn't understand compromise. All these things that Harvey was fantastic at, he was horrible at. So he was underperforming. And I think he felt he had a lot to prove. He came from a family of heroes, and Dan White had failed many times. He'd been sort of kicked out of the Army, he'd been fired from the police force and the fire department, and this was his shot. So, you know, there were a lot of different things. Harvey's theory is that he was gay. And Harvey said that to the press a few weeks before he was killed. He said, you need to look into this man's history of mental instability. I think he's a closet case, and a closet case is the most dangerous sort of guy. And so that was his theory, and I included that. There was a lot more to it. Yeah. I mean, I liked that about him. I thought, unlike Anita, who it just seemed so clear-cut, he was a bit more complex.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take 2 more questions, here and here.
Great, thanks. My name is Josh Bronstein, and I'm a student at Harvard Business School. And somebody in the business school asked me, in the business world, is it always better to be out rather than not out? And should we be encouraging our colleagues in the business world to come out? And my response was not necessarily it's an individual decision. Yet it seems like the message of Milk is, you know, everybody has to come out. So I'm wondering how you reconcile sort of that message of, you know, for the movement, everybody needs to come out versus the fact that many individuals aren't ready to come out, or maybe in situations where, you know, it's not in their best interest, whether in business or anything else that they're doing, to come out.
You know, I'm a really big advocate of coming out. I think that that's what creates change. Like, I do believe in that. I think there are probably some instances where your life is at risk where, you know, perhaps you shouldn't. I don't take it so far as outing, except if a politician is anti-gay in their policies, and then I don't mind outing them. There's a documentary coming out about that called Outrage, which you should see. But you know, I mean, I gotta say, I think that in the business world, that business people who are having a difficult time coming out, I would really urge them to form coalitions and to do it in a way that, you know, perhaps you can maintain your power or whatever that is, or your safety, but to do it and to figure out a way to do it. And I think, like Hollywood proved, you know, there was a time when it was difficult and you didn't do it. Even if you were a producer or director, it was still hidden. And obviously that's changed, and I got to tell you, it's now really, it's a powerful thing to be gay or lesbian in Hollywood. It's, you know, the Velvet Mafia is real, and maybe you could, you could take that into the business world. Why not?
My name is Daphne Abiel. I'm a straight Harvard alum, and I'm a journalist and a freelance writer. And I saw your film. I admired it very, very much. This isn't a question about the film. I wondered if you would speak to the bill that's coming out of the District of Columbia that will support gay and lesbian marriage. I understand that if it passes in the district, it will have to be approved by Congress, and this is a way that such a bill might get national, I mean, it will be a problem, but it will get national recognition.
Yeah, no, I know it's a sticky situation. I was literally getting a dome tour of the Capitol when that was announced, and I got on my BlackBerry, and I was with someone that works, you know, very intimately in the floor of the House, and, you know, he was freaking out and really worried about what it meant, and I was pretty excited. I did think this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for this issue to have a national stage. And you know what? Why not? I think the time is now for it to have a national stage.
Okay, I didn't mean it. One more question.
Actually, I kept standing here because I was hoping you would be compassionate to let me ask my question. Thank you. So it's actually maybe a good way to end because it's really about the global focus now of this LGBT movement that's been U.S.-based. And from your experience with the Academy Awards and the censorship that happened, particularly with your experience, I was wondering if you could talk about that export of the LGBT U.S. model to the world, both its value and its limitations, and what you've experienced as you've found your message going global. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's sort of depressing a little bit. I mean, granted, I'm not supposed to go to China or India now. They didn't sort of like what I said at the Academy Awards so much. I think that I like that the United States has always been, the country to follow. We're the model to follow. And we're, in some way a leader in civil rights issues. But it just doesn't, we're not quite there yet, It makes me feel like we really have to work and work hard and work fast and not say we're going to get there in 25 years, but let's get there in 5. Let's get there as soon as possible so that we can lead this world. Because there are some countries, I mean, you hear the stories coming out of Iran, you hear the stories coming out of some of these organizations that are looking out for gay and lesbian people worldwide, and it's really horrifying. There was one crisis line that got a call from a man, what country? I think it might, Saudi Arabia, I believe, and he was being attacked, and there was a mob forming outside of this grocery store, and he called this line in the United States for help, and we had to go all the way through all these channels and call the United States Embassy and finally get somebody in that country to go down and to save this guy because they wouldn't do it themselves. And it's and I like that we have that leadership position. I like that we were able to save that guy, but we really got to lead by example, and that means comprehensive civil rights in this country for all gay and lesbian people. We got to do it quick.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming. I'd like to thank Noelia and Sean and Jesse from the IOP staff for making this possible. And I would just like to say I've been here at the Kennedy School for nearly 6 years, and I've had some really spectacular moments. But today was really amazing. And I think we did what we do best, which is convene a group of people around a very important issue. And I want to thank Joe McCarthy one more time for committing to making this an annual event. Thank you. Finally, I'd like to thank Thor and Liz. We couldn't be more proud of you. And of course, Lance, thank you so much for joining us tonight.